Workshop topics: the correct lubricants. Not all oils are the same, and when they're used for the lubrication of a lathe, it is important to use the ones that are suitable for the job. I'm starting this video with a warning. Do not use grease. Unless the lathe is specifically designed to use grease, you will do irreparable damage to the lathe bearings if you don't use the correct lubricants, and grease is definitely not what you need for a plain bearing spindle. This filler on the headstock is designed for very thin oil to lubricate the taper bearings on this Myford ML7R. When I rebuilt this lathe, I didn't have any proper spindle oil, so instead I used some lubricating oil for steam engine bearings. I would like to mention that the sound that you've just heard is nothing to do with my digestive system. I'm removing the oil from the headstock lubricator. It took a surprisingly long time to drain this oil. There was plenty in there. Luckily, most of the oil that was in there was the original. I just added a little bit at the end. A couple of weeks ago, when I was actually at the Myford factory, filming for a 4-part video series all about Myford, I thought it was probably a good idea to ask what are the lubricants used in Myford lathes. I was shown a couple of bottles of oil, one for the slideways and one for the headstock. So if my lifespan's long enough to be able to drain all this oil from the headstock, I'm going to refill it with the proper stuff. While I was at Myford, I bought a couple of bottles of this oil, and here they both are, sat on the bed of my Myford ML7R. The one on the left-hand side is the headstock oil, and the one on the right-hand side is the slideway oil. And as you can see, it's a different colour and a different viscosity. In fact, both of these oils are completely different to each other. With the syringe that I'd been using to drain the old oil from the headstock, I refilled it with new oil, and as you can see, it's a very light colour. It's time to mention something about the design of ML7 lathes, which are different to the Super 7 and ML7R lathes. On a Super 7 and ML7R, the front bearing is a taper cone, quite different to the older style of ML7 lathe, which has a parallel spindle that runs in bearings that are supplied with oil by drip-feed glass oilers. For either of these types of headstock, you must not use thick oil. It needs to be thin enough to lubricate the parts. The ML7R and the Super 7 range have a different oiling system on the rear bearing. These are a pair of ball racers. And the lubricator is designed to use an oil gun. And I assume that you would use the same oil that's in the oil gun for all of these oiling points, but not this one. This has to be headstock oil. Here you see me refilling the lubricator with the headstock oil. The other bottle of oil is called slideway oil, completely different to the headstock oil. It's a different colour and a different viscosity. It's thicker, just like a girlfriend I used to have. What I'm going to do is drain my existing oil from my oil gun back into the Ryolang oil can that I use on the workbench. And as usual, whenever I work with oil, I get it everywhere, so I have a cloth close at hand. This oil gun I bought a while ago, and guess what? It is a Myford oil gun, because originally, from the auction site that we all know and love, I bought an oil gun that was absolutely useless, and it was so bad I threw it in the bin. But what can you expect for under £10? This oil gun is not £10, it's quite expensive. It's made in Switzerland and it works. Here I'm clearing all the old oil out of it, getting ready to fill it with the slideway oil. And here I'm doing just that. There are many lubrication points on this Myford, as you will see shortly, and all of them can be lubricated using this oil. And as far as I'm aware, including the rear ball racers on the headstock. I will clarify this with Richard at Myford, and I will include something about lubrication in one of the Myford videos. With the oil gun full of oil, all I have to do is replace the lid, then wipe the oil gun with a cloth, because I always seem to spill oil somewhere whenever I do an operation like this. By the way, I'll mention one more time, I am not sponsored by Myford. I just like the product. That's why I have a Myford lathe, and that's why I bought a Myford oil gun. This is a really good quality piece of equipment, and it doesn't leak. Here's my 1980s vintage Myford ML7R. I refurbished this lathe a while ago, but most of the refurbishment was cosmetic. The mechanical parts were in excellent condition. There was a lot of play in the spindle in the headstock, which needed some adjustment as outlined on the Myford website. And believe it or not, it isn't quite as simple as you think, and getting the adjustment wrong could be catastrophic. I checked that all the oilers were not blocked by poking them with a pointed piece of metal, and they're not. As you can see, the oil gun is pumping the oil into the right place. The front one was problematic, as was the rear, for entirely different reasons. The machining tolerance between the quill and the main body of the tailstock is very tight. I don't mean that the quill is tight, it's just the engineering standard is very high, it's almost a perfect fit. The oiler at the end where the hand wheel is at a slight angle, and you have to take this into consideration and hold the oil gun on the lubricator nipple at the same angle. In this part of the clip, I'm lubricating the cross slide, first of all on the top and also from the underneath on the slideways, and now it already feels a lot better than it did. I'm really glad I bought the proper oils, just to prove a point. I thought my general lubricating oil was good, and I've used it for many years on all my lathe beds, but this stuff is actually better. I don't know, it's sort of slipperier. I'm having a bit of an oiling frenzy. I'm lubricating everywhere where there's an oiling point. And sometimes I even applied a bit more oil, just for luck. Once I applied some oil at the front end of the tailstock where it meets the bed, it became very slippery. So I also applied some oil at the other end. In this clip I'm showing how little wear there is on this machine by winding the saddle back and forth. Normally on old lathes you will get some wear near the headstock where you do most of the moving of the saddle, but on this machine it's exactly the same all the way along. I must admit this is a great old machine. There's nothing wrong with it, it works perfectly. And now by using the proper oils that I bought from Myford, it's even better. You can actually feel the difference. And that's it for this video. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.